All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Strong Authentication Best Practices for Your Online Services. I'm Christian Simcoe, Marketing Manager for GlobalSign's Identity and Access Management Solutions, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. To ensure the security of your customers' information, you need more than just a simple username and password these days. On this webinar, we will share with you reasons for stronger authentication, best practices for implementing authentication methods, and some use cases to learn what actual GlobalSign customers are doing today. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that the phones are on mute. We do encourage questions, and we'll leave plenty of time after the presentation for Q&A. To ask a question, please use the question field within the GoToWebinar toolbar. We will be recording today's webinar and providing a link to the recording in a follow-up email to you. With that, it's time to get started. So today's webinar is presented by GlobalSign. We are a leading identity solution and services provider. For some background on GlobalSign, GlobalSign was founded in 1996. We have 8 global offices and 3 R&D centers, and a strong network of over 5,000 active partners. Our products include traditional digital certificate solutions, such as PKI, and identity and access management, and other solutions for securing the Internet of Everything, or IoE. So 300,000 companies interact with GlobalSign's IAM solutions, with about 4.7 million user authentications monthly. For more information about us, we welcome you to visit our website at www.globalsign.com. And our presenter today is Jesse Cuerto. Jesse is a member of GlobalSign's IAM product management team. He is a key contributor to the technical direction of our IAM solutions, working with sales, marketing, and engineering teams here at GlobalSign. Jesse, would you like to take it from here?
Thank you, Christian. So today we are going to go over strong authentication. Hopefully we can give you some food for thought and maybe some new insight into strong authentication deployments in an online service. We'll start by looking at how strong authentication is categorized. Strong authentication comes in many forms and they have different usages. The common thing is that they use more than one factor to authenticate the online users. The categories are what you have, what you know, and what you are. And combining these factors increases the strength of strong authentication. The availability of these 3 types vary, and some are easier to deploy than others. For example, a one-time password is a good example of something we have. It might be a simple hardware token generating a new one-time password every minute, or maybe a printed out list of one-time passwords that you use either in pseudo-random order or in order. A simple password is too something that we know, but that is not a strong authentication method. Something we know, like an OTP password, is typically combined with something we have or something we are. And PKI, public key infrastructure, which means basically certificates, is the most common technology behind something that we know. Then we have a credential stored, usually in some device like a smart card or your cell phone, and we know the PIN code that actually unlocks the key inside. And PKI is still the only technology that can be used equally strong electronic signatures as handwritten signatures in most countries. Then when we go to something that you are, we talk about biometrics. And the proliferation of fingerprint scanners in mobile phones has in recent years brought biometric authentication to the masses. Besides fingerprints, there are implementations for facial recognition, iris scans, blood vessel patterns, and even heart rate pattern recognition. Some of these credentials might be hard to change, such as the biometrics. Okay, well, fingerprints can be changed with a knife, but it's usually by mistake. And changing one's iris pattern with a knife is not something I would really recommend trying on. On the other hand, smart cards and tokens are relatively easy to replace if due care has been taken and, for example, key recovery is possible. So, what's so good about strong authentication, besides the name, of course? If you look on the headlines on any major news sites, you will come across constant notifications of data breaches. And using strong authentication, at least the user's passwords wouldn't have been discovered, or it wouldn't have even mattered in the end. That's because in most cases with strong authentication, the user cannot hand out a credential even by mistake, unless, of course, he gives his OTP token to a stranger, but that is quite unlikely to happen. In this case, even if somebody gets access to your user database, the strong authentication would not only protect the credentials, but also, in many cases, it would prevent the database breach itself, whether it would be by social engineering or breaching an admin password. And while making transactions online, we sometimes deal with large amounts of money or make substantial commitments. Strong authentication, and especially PKI, can be used to provide non-repudiation to these transactions. If both parties have digitally signed the transaction, it cannot be later disputed. On the other hand, the existence of strong authentication or strong credentials help organizations to digitize their processes by taking them from costly manual processes to an online site. And one of our oldest customers has been able to save hundreds of millions of dollars by taking some of their processes online, enabling their customers to conduct business with them online instead of visiting a local office. And despite the questionable fame that some early strong authentication schemes, especially government-issued electronic IDs, most of the methods are quite easy to use. For example, your mobile phone. They can be used for strong authentication and act as handy tokens for you. And on the right side, we will see that regulation also plays a big role in strong authentication. The recently to be ratified eIDAS directive in Europe for cross-border federation of digital identities is a great example of that. And in the United States, another example would be the New Virginia Digital Identity Law. And in Europe, in the financial sector, the new PSD2 regulation bluntly states that all online financial transactions must be done with strong authentication. And this regulation will come into force later this year. And last but not least is that strong authentication can actually be easier than you. Just imagine how many times you have forgotten a 16-digit random password requiring lowercase letters, capital letters, numbers, and special characters. It is much easier to simply remember a PIN code for your own cell phone, or maybe not even need to remember anything. Your fingerprint is good enough for many things. Now we talk a little bit about LOAS, or level of assurances. Basically, the level of assurance is simply an indicator of the strength of the user authentication. It's important to realize two different things. First, authentication method itself has a level of strength tied to it. For example, how easy how easy it is to break into your cell phone or a tamper-resistant smart card and get your credentials from there. And on the other hand, it's also about user registration process. Even the strongest possible method using the highest possible grade cryptographic cards would receive a lower level of 0 if there wouldn't be any kind of registration or identity verification process in place. For example, if you would buy a smart token from a street vendor, you would get a level of assurance level of 0 on that identity stored in the token, even though it would be safely secured in a cryptographically sound environment. And as with other things in life, there's a place and there's a time for everything. And when we consider strong authentication, we are talking about confidential resources or sensitive or high-value transactions, something that we need to keep relatively secure. And important thing is that we don't have to require strong authentication at each and every step. So we need to know our resources, know our data, and know which part requires stronger protection. And this will be unique to all online services, as each of them will have a different set of attributes the online service provider needs to evaluate. And when do we need a strong authentication? Well, you can evaluate the online user in different ways. There are multiple attributes that can be discovered about the user, and if something differs from the normal profile you have created for the user, you might want to require stronger authentication. For example, if you're a customer that normally logs in from the town next to you, suddenly connects to your service from the other side of the world, you might want to ask for a stronger credential to make sure that you are still dealing with the correct person and not someone who has been able to steal your customer's password. It is also worth considering if you need to ask stronger authentication from all your customers or users. In a customer organization, there are a lot of different types of roles, and maybe not all of them needs to authenticate using strong methods. Application-centric simply means developing the decision point for each application. The application is responsible for making decisions on what type of identity verification should be used, and even require that certain attributes of the user to be sent to the application. Putting too much decision or policy control to the application makes it more timely to deploy and change later on. Identity providers that can't for policy management act as gateways to third-party authentication sources, leaving the decision control up to the application. The next step is centralized management. Centralized leaves the application side simpler, easier to deploy using platform standard interfaces, APIs. And even non-standard authentication methods, for example, the bank ID, can be integrated through the IDP, identity provider, only once and used in all services. Changes in security policies are quick to implement. The identity provider will not be the all-powerful and all-deciding hub for the applications, but quite a lot of policy control can be given to the IDP. And in real life, most, if not all, applications will retain some level of control. And the last one, in real life, most environments are more or less using both approaches, centralized and application-centric, especially when dealing with federation. Applications themselves could perform their own risk evaluations based on the information that IDP sends them, and therefore might decide to ask for better authentication. And like in information security always, this is a balancing act. Both approaches have their benefits and issues, so it's a decision that must be made by the service provider where to manage authentication and authorization policies. And this differentiation is very important, especially with strong authentication. The heavy work can be done by the identity provider, leaving the application in a more agile state. It will become much easier to change authentication methods, introduce completely new ones, and deploy application updates, and overall ease the maintenance of the application side if the IDP can handle the non-application issues. The tendency for online service providers requiring stronger authentication to deploy their own token might be a wrong one. The end users do not need, and more importantly, do not want, yet another credential that they are going to misplace in a few months' time and come asking for a new one. I have done this many times in the past year. So what we suggest is that you would use an identity provider to enable your end users to access your site with a credential they already have. If your customers can use something that they already have, it will definitely increase user satisfaction and generate a better user experiences. Think of this as a black hole for tokens is like black hole for unpaired socks. How many have you lost or misplaced? And here we can see a very, very short clip of an authentication process. And what we can see that it is not easy, it is not a simple thing. And creating an authentication method flow into your own solution in-house might not be such a good idea after all. The very beauty of identity and access management is that it can hide complexity of user authentication. And creating and maintaining these kind of complex authentication flows for each application by coding yourself, there is a much better way. Building support for as many different authentication methods as possible is important, as is regular and timely updates. Some authentication sources, such as the electronic ID cards, have a standard SAML interface, and some of them assume that you have to tap into the CA, which basically means PKI, infrastructure of the EID. If these methods and infrastructures and protocols are supported by the IDP out of the box, you don't have to code your own additions to the IDP, and thus losing the product-based approach where you can rely on the vendor for protocol updates and just deploy the maintenance releases of the IDP to your infrastructure. Here we see some examples. As always, the role of the IDP is to facilitate the authentication process for the online service. That can be an online site, desktop application, mobile app, or even an IoT device. The IDP can be connected to multiple external authentication sources while offering a single and easy to implement protocol stack for the service. And an IDP that is deployed to provide strong authentication for the applications needs to support not only the web SSO standards as SAML, VS Federation, OAuth, OpenID Connect, Mobile Connect very soon. It needs to tap into the PKI infrastructure, have support for OTP servers through OAuth or similar, or support non-standard protocols used, by example, the financial sector and some governments. And in most cases, when integrating country-specific electronic IDs, we've integrated our products directly to the PKI infrastructure of the CA. And when this is done on a product level, the integration work itself becomes very straightforward and easy. And easy in practice means that a built-in support for multiple authentication methods means that once you've integrated your IDP to the authentication sources, either third-party or your own, then you can simply activate a new method for an online service in less than a minute. No coding is needed. No development need, just click a button and the new method will be active in the login screen. And the above screen here is from the GlobalSign SSO administrative console, where a bunch of authentication methods have been activated to a service. Authentication methods can also be associated to a certain part of the online application, certain user groups that can have direct members or indirect members based on roles. Needless to say, you can create quite accurate access policies with good policy engine, and still all this without any coding. Step-up authentication is a term used when you have to use a stronger authentication method to access a new section of an online service. For example, you could access the basic functionality of a website without any kind of registration, run a completely public site, but need to register for some additional use cases, for example, forums. And with step-out authentication, you can go all the way to smart cards and legally binding electronic signatures. You don't have to require strong authentication immediately, but only when needed, and gradually increase the strength requirements, either based on your own needs or because of regulatory requirements. Here I would like to present our first customer case, TEKES. TEKES is a research fund that gives out grants to startups and established enterprises for R&D. And every year they will give out about 600 million euro. That's ranging from $650 to $700 million to local Finnish companies. And the request process is actually handled in a SharePoint site of TEKES. The companies or groups seeking funding first need to register to the system using strong authentication, for example, bank ID, and also confirm the phone number during the registration. In practice, a confirmation SMS is sent to the mobile phone, and the user needs to input the sequence to the registration form during registration. And once they have registered, they can start the process for the funding request, invite other users, for example, to review the financial statements that they will be presenting. And access to this portal requires the use of one-time passwords that are sent directly to the user's phone. Every year, thousands and thousands of users and companies are using the TEKES service. The second customer case is POSTI. They have over 500,000 registered users. They are offering a service where they are scanning your mail, your paper mail for you, and make it available online in an electronic form. And naturally, this needs very strong authentication, so you can't just read everybody's mail just by knowing their name and guessing their password. POSTI started with actually requiring a standard username and password combination, but in order to achieve a certain level of security, they needed to have very complex and cumbersome process. For example, every user needed to have a 12-character password, including special characters and numbers, and you needed to change it every 2 weeks. Thankfully, they came to their senses and added bank IDs as a way to use strong authentication and log in a much easier way. And now we will walk through this in practice using a mobile application and their website. On the left, you can see the actual POSTI website, and on the right, you can see the mobile app provided by the bank, in this case, Nordea Bank. And we start the login process by choosing our bank from the menu from the left. After choosing the correct bank, the NetPOSTI will actually contact your application running on your phone and wait for it to give it back an access token. Now you can see that the POSTI web application has redirected the user to his own bank, Nordea. And first the user has to input his PIN on the website and then a confirmation PIN on his mobile device. This all happens very quickly and takes just 5 to 10 seconds. After entering the correct PIN code to his mobile app, the user simply presses the login button and gets a confirmation page. This page will list all the data that would be submitted to POSTI, and here the user has a chance to review his or her information and either allow it or deny it. After allowing the transfer of the information, the user is transparently logged into the POSTI site and can manage his or her mail in electronic form. For our last example, we have the S Group logging using mobile PKI. The S Group spans multiple industries and is the largest retail chain in its market. They operate in the Nordics, Baltics, and in Russia. S Group has adopted an IDP-based solution to offer authentication services to their various business units, and thus removing the need for each online service to build its own user repository with user registration for every single of the subsites. The customer portal that is shown in the next screenshots includes the purchase information of the customer, loyalty card earnings, and how much they are receiving back as bonuses, as well as warranty information on the purchases that they have made through S Group shops. And how many times have you misplaced the receipt that includes the warranty for a gadget that you have? Here they are all stored in electronic form automatically, safely online. And for this demonstration, the login sequence we are about to show uses mobile PKI. The online service is located in Finland, while the user is located in Italy. He logs on to the service using his mobile phone and digitally signs the authentication request using the SIM card of his mobile phone. This is one of the strongest authentication methods in the market, and as you can see, one of the easiest ones to use as well. The only thing you need to remember is your own mobile phone number. We start again with the S Group site, with the website on the left and the mobile application to the right. And in this screen, we simply click the login button. Then we are presented with a login screen that asks for a user name and password, but we are not using that today. Instead, we are using our mobile PKI to log in, so we choose that. And this is the only thing you need to remember, your own phone number. We simply enter our phone number and click the login button next. Here we can see that the website is presenting an ID number that is also received by your phone PKI app. In this way, you can see that you are actually sending your information to the correct place. This works exactly like Bluetooth pairing, for example with a headset. After inputting the PIN code, the user will be redirected transparently again to the original website, but this time as a login user. And now he can access all his purchase data, warranty receipts, and so on. All right, and as a summary, security. The obvious improvement comes from the strength of the authentication method, both the method itself and the registration process. Another improvement comes from the fact that in most cases with strong authentication, there are no central databases or directories that could lead to the exposure of millions of passwords. Another improvement is that with some strong credentials, it is actually impossible for the end user to mistakenly hand out or reveal their credentials in social engineering attacks. In many cases, the end users already have a strong authentication method or credential with them. They might have a one-time password token from a bank or a government-issued electronic ID card. They might have an identity from their mobile network operator. And upcoming Mobile Connect is an authentication method and a protocol that is being now deployed all around the world. And in some cases, the mobile network operators deploy a method at a very high level of assurance. So the chances are good that your customers already have one or more credentials. And therefore, you can be selective with your strategy of deploying stronger authentication options. Not all resources need ironclad protection. Choose which parts of your resources need better protection and deploy stronger authentication only when and where needed. The deployment model of the authentication policy is quite important with strong authentication. In many cases, you need to support not just one, but several protocols, some of which might be, unfortunately, non-standard. Having a centralized authentication and authorization policy makes it easy to adapt to changes and deploy your authentication methods in a quicker fashion. It will also reduce complexity and saving operations costs in the long run. Traditional web SSO protocols won't simply cut it with strong authentication. There are multiple protocols, and an identity provider can be used to standardize the service or app side to a handful or even a single protocol. And if you avoid developing support directly to your services, applications, or apps, then you are free to add, change, remove new methods simply through configuring your identity provider. No coding, remember? And strong authentication might have created a bit of a bad reputation in its early days with smart cards or when end users needed to install readers and drivers to their computers and really couldn't use their cards anywhere else than at home and at work. Modern strong authentication options can offer extremely easy ways to use and yet still be highly secure for end user identity verification. Okay, that is all from me today. Thank you. Back to you, Christian.
Yes, well, thank you for a great presentation. We've come to the time where we are fielding everyone's questions that have come in now. We have a few questions that have come in that we will take them and provide answers to. If you do have additional questions, make sure that you get them into the GoToMeeting questions field in the toolbar now. Our first question, Jesse, is how does step-up authentication work with a mobile app, which is fully based on OAuth 2.0 access tokens?
A step-up authentication in this case might be by, for example, using a one-time password, or if the user's operators support it, which mostly hopefully do very soon, using mobile PKI. And both of these methods provide a very strong level of assurance of the user's information.
Okay, great. And it looks like our next question is almost somewhat related. Can you describe how OTP works?
All right. So in the beginning of the presentation, we mentioned that passwords are not a strong authentication method. But what then makes OTPs, one-time passwords, a strong one? It's a really good question. And the fact is the two first words, one time. You are sent a password for one-time use only. So imagine that somebody is eavesdropping on you, watching over your shoulder as you enter your password using your mobile device. In case of a normal password, you would now be in serious trouble. But a one-time password can only be used once. So once you press login, that's it. Even if an attacker would do the same procedure right after you, they would absolutely get no access to the service. So one-time usability, that makes it strong.
Great, thanks, Jesse. It looks like we have one question remaining here. If you do have another question that you'd like to ask, please submit that now, and we will get to that after answering this next question. Jesse, if we were to allow our users to log into our services with their Facebook credentials, is there a way to add stronger authentication methods to that process?
Yes, they are, and it's very straightforward and easy to do. And actually, this is a very good idea in many use cases. You don't need strong authentication right away. But for example, for some additional services or categories of transactions. So yes, it's very easy to integrate in the flow. Basically, you first ask the user to log in using a Facebook account on some similar level, Google account. And then if the user requires extra privileges based on your own policies, you can ask for additional confirmation of the user's identity using strong authentication.
Great. We did get one more question that came in. Once again, if you do have additional questions, make sure you log those into the GoToWebinar questions field now. This next question, Jesse, this is sort of a layup for us, I guess. Does GlobalSign provide a software to enable SSO?
Yes, we do, and it's called, not so surprisingly, the GlobalSign SSO.
Yeah, which is part of our IAM solution suite.
Yes.
Okay. It looks like that was our last question. Oh, well, we got one more that just came in, snuck in. Are social login acceptable as first factor in a finance industry?
As far as I know, it is not, at least in Europe, since the upcoming EID law bluntly states that you must use strong authentication in all financial transactions, and social logins are not considered strong. So the answer is no, at least in Europe.
Okay. And it looks like that has taken us down to our final question. Once again, we want to thank everyone for attending today, and thank you, Jesse, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
For more information on GlobalSign, once again, you can log into our website at www.globalsign.com or join us on any of our social sites. Jesse, can you scroll down to the next slide, please?
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Right here we provide our web address and phone numbers and email address for getting in touch with us. We will follow up with everyone who attended today and everyone who registered with a recording of the webinar. A few people have asked for the slide presentation, and we will send those slides out to you as well. Once again, thank you everyone, and have a great day.